All right, let's dive right into a really fascinating and honestly pretty important cultural puzzle in mental health. So picture this. A study comes out and finds that a huge number of first-generation Korean Americans are dealing with depression, but almost none of them are actually seeking help. So what's going on here? Why the disconnect? Let's unpack what the research tells us.
Okay, so the very first thing that jumped out to researchers was this major paradox, a really big contradiction right at the heart of mental health within this specific community.
And I mean, just look at these numbers. They're staggering. You've got studies showing that nearly half, we're talking up to 49% of first-generation Korean Americans are reporting symptoms of depression. But then you look at who's actually using mental health services, it's only 17%. That is a massive gap, and we really need to understand why it's there.
So, right, this becomes the central question, doesn't it? Why does this huge treatment gap exist? Well, a couple of researchers, Yoonjung Kim and Yoonuk M, they really dug into this. And what they found is that the answer, it's not simple at all. It's actually super complex and deeply, deeply tied to culture.
Okay, to really get a handle on this gap, we have to first understand a pretty crucial point. The word depression itself. It doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. The way people see it, what it is, what causes it, how you're supposed to treat it, man, it can be worlds apart depending on your cultural background.
And you can see this so clearly when you compare the models. On one side, you've got the Western model, right? It generally sees depression as a biological thing, a problem with brain chemistry, neurotransmitters, that kind of stuff. But then you look at the traditional Oriental model, and it's a totally different story. It's seen as an imbalance of the body's energy, what's known as qi, and the forces of yin and yang. I mean, these are just fundamentally different ways of thinking about the exact same problem.
In fact, there's a specific term for this in the Korean community. A lot of people understand emotional distress through a concept called hwabyung. It literally translates to fire illness or anger illness. The idea is that it's a condition caused by suppressing anger, which then it bubbles up and shows up as physical symptoms. And here's the really crucial part. Talking about hwabyung carries way less stigma than getting a formal diagnosis of depression.
And the connection between the two, it's incredibly strong. Get this, one study found that for people who were experiencing hwabyung, there was a 67% chance they were also experiencing what Western medicine would call depression. So the two are deeply intertwined, but one is just so much easier to talk about within the community.
And really, this all boils down to the cultural context. The research points out that admitting to a mental illness, it isn't just seen as a personal issue. It can feel like you're inviting criticism and shame not just on yourself, but on your entire family. And that right there is a hugely powerful reason to avoid seeking help through those conventional Western channels.
Okay, so we have the why. But how does this cultural view actually affect people's choices in the real world? Well, the data from that Kim and M study makes this crystal clear when you look at how people feel about specific treatments.
So, what the researchers did was they talked to 73 first-generation Korean Americans. They gave them a list of 9 different treatment options, everything from antidepressants to exercise to acupuncture. And for each one, they asked 2 simple questions. How willing would you be to actually try this? And how much shame would you feel for doing it?
And the results? Wow. They revealed an incredibly strong and really clear pattern. At one end of the spectrum, you've got exercise. People were totally willing to try it, and they felt almost zero shame about it. But then you go to the complete opposite end. And what's there? Antidepressants. Low willingness and the absolute highest level of shame attached.
When they were asked to pick the one treatment they would be most willing to try, the answer was just overwhelming. A huge 58% of the participants chose exercise. Counseling came in at a distant second, and then you see antidepressants way down at just 9%.
And then you look at the flip side, and it's just as telling. When they asked what people would be most unwilling to try, 53%, more than half, pointed directly to antidepressants. The data just couldn't be clearer. Shame and stigma are the major drivers behind these choices.
But this isn't just about pointing out a problem. What's so powerful about this research is that it also points toward a potential solution. It shows us a way to maybe start bridging this cultural divide.
So here is the key insight, the big takeaway. Exercise isn't just a popular option. It's a doorway. It's a culturally acceptable, low-shame way to start getting care. It's a first step that feels safe. So what this suggests is that for healthcare providers, maybe the most effective way to even begin a conversation about mental health is to just talk about exercise.
And think about why it's such an effective bridge. It really checks all the boxes. First off, it's low cost and safe. It also helps people feel more in control of their own lives, by letting them set and achieve their own goals. And on top of all the physical and mental benefits that we already know exercise has, it comes with basically zero social stigma. It's a win-win-win.
All right, so let's zoom out for a second. What does this really specific case study about Korean American communities teach us about healthcare as a whole?
I think the biggest takeaway here is this. Cultural competence isn't just a nice-to-have skill for doctors. It is an absolute necessity. To give people effective care, providers have to meet patients where they are. They have to understand their beliefs, their fears, and what feels acceptable to them. Just offering a one-size-fits-all solution, well, it's pretty much bound to fail.
And that leaves us with a final, and I think really powerful thought. This study, it isn't just about one community. Its lesson is universal. It really forces us to ask ourselves, how else can we listen, adapt, and build these kinds of bridges to make sure that everyone, no matter their background, has a path to healing that they are actually willing to walk down?